Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you for Reason to Resist from Trinidad, Cuba on January 13th, 2025. And today I'm pleased to be joined again by geopolitical analyst extraordinaire Laith Marouf. He's coming to us today from Beirut. The last time we spoke to Laith was in 2024, late in December, I believe, when conditions in Lebanon remained highly unstable. And so one of the reasons we want to talk to you today, Laith, is to get your read on what's currently happening in and around the region. But also I want to start by wishing you, despite all that's going on, a peaceful and prosperous 2025.
Thank you for having me, Dimitri, and Happy New Year's to you and your loved ones, and Merry Christmas, belated Orthodox Christmas, I guess, for everybody in Greece and in the East.
Thank you. So, Laith, for more than 2 years, Lebanon has been without a president. But this month, its parliament finally chose one. His name is Joseph Aoun, and he is also the head of Lebanon's army, or at least was up until he accepted this post. Evidently, Aoun had the backing of the US, France, and Saudi Arabia. Now, before I ask you about Mr. Aoun, could you just briefly describe for our audience's benefit how political power is divided up constitutionally in Lebanon between the various major religious groups?
Well, this is a kind of common law situation where it's not written into the constitution, but the president is usually a Maronite Christian, the prime minister is a Sunni Muslim, and the Speaker of the House, a Shia Muslim. The other thing that we need to note here is that in 1989, after the end of the Civil War, there was a conference in Al-Taif in the Saudi Kingdom with an agreement signed at the end of it, which is the Taif Agreement, that kind of balances the power sharing in the country of Lebanon between Syria and Saudi Kingdom. And at that point, basically, because Syria was the guarantor for the Christian minority and the Shias, and the Saudis were the guarantors for the Sunni population. So traditionally, Syria had a broker situation where it had say on who is the president of Lebanon, while the Saudis had control of who's the prime minister as the guarantors of the Shia population. Now with the Sunni population. So now with the collapse of Syria and the capture of Syria by the Israelis, Saudis, Turks, Americans, basically the whole Zionist empire together, that means that the imperial side has control of naming the president and the prime minister, because Syria's influence fell to those who captured it. And so what we saw is an immediate rush to appoint a president in power. We have to note that for 2.5 years, there was no president. It was vacant, the position. And for almost 3 years, we had a caretaker government, the prime minister that is also just a caretaker that wasn't elected, basically. And so this rush to appoint a president meant the ignoring what was actually written in the Constitution, which says that no serving grade A civil servant can be appointed to the president. That includes, of course, sitting generals and high-ranking civil service, officials. And so, they had to have 2 years of retirement and or resigning from their post before they are elected as president. So that was totally ignored to rush in the presidency of Joseph Aoun.
And just quickly, is Aoun, has he given up the position of head of the Lebanese army, or does he continue to occupy that position?
No, he gave up that position, and now there are wrangling to appoint a replacement for him. But what we should note from the election of Aoun is that number one, there was all these foreign ambassadors sitting in the parliament, something like 60 ambassadors, and of course that shows you how little independence the country had, and the vote, which was I think the 17th vote in those 2.5 years. The first round, he was the only candidate, and he didn't get the 2/3 needed. So they went into a 2-hour break, again breaching the procedures of the parliament. And in those 2 hours, General Aoun, now President Aoun, met with the Hezbollah bloc and the Patriotic Movement bloc, the Christian Maronite party that the former president used to belong to, and negotiated with them. These were the parties that were refusing to vote in the first round for him. And it seems like Hezbollah and the Patriotic Movement got some guarantees, and they had a second round of the vote, and he got the vast majority of votes in the parliament. And now they're working towards appointing a new prime minister, a new head of the military, and Joseph Aoun is the president.
So I was a bit surprised that Hezbollah and its allies withdrew their opposition to Aoun. He apparently has come out and said, I think this is after he ascended to the position of president, that he will ensure that the Lebanese state has the, quote, exclusive right to bear arms, close quote, in Lebanon. I think everybody understands that to mean that he intends to disarm Hezbollah. Do you think that is his serious intention? And if so, do you think he stands any prospect of succeeding?
Well, I mean, every president before him said that, so it's not out of the ordinary. But obviously, I don't think the Lebanese military or the Lebanese state has the military might to actually try to disarm Hezbollah. And given that what we're seeing in Syria, the out and out ethnic cleansing and genocide and massacres of Alawis, Shias, Christians, Druze, and also Sunnis that don't belong to the cult. We're seeing even the Sufis, which represent the majority of Syrian Sunni Muslims, also being targeted. So given that, it's impossible to think that Hezbollah will give up its arms. What will guarantee that these Wahhabi death squads in Israel don't come in and conduct the same kinds of massacres that we are seeing right now in Syria?
So last time we spoke, we talked about Israel's relentless violations of the 60-day ceasefire that went into effect on November 27th. Since we spoke, so within, let's say, the last 2 to 3 weeks, has Israel continued to violate the ceasefire relentlessly? And if so, has there been any retaliation on the part of the resistance in South Lebanon?
Yeah, they continue to violate the ceasefire. In fact, today there was 2 attacks in the south of Lebanon and north of even the Litani River. And so the Hezbollah's last word about this was in the speech of Sayyid Qasim, the new Secretary General of Hezbollah, where they said they will be retaliating, maybe before, maybe after, maybe on the 60-day ceasefire deadline. So there is, of course, the pressure building up on Hezbollah and on the Lebanese now new government, because in his speech, Joseph Aoun, while he said that he will be trying to disarm any militias in the country, he also said that he will be liberating Lebanese territory and pushing the Israeli occupation out. That's in his speech. So, there is now the pressure building up. There's no excuse for the Lebanese government and the Lebanese military not to do something. And, we'll see what happens. The deadline is January 27th, I believe. That's 60 days. And it will come basically within a week from the ascension of Emperor Trump into the throne. So those are the dates that are going to define everything.
So recently, Laith, I saw an amazing report that you and Hadi Hotate did from, I believe, South Lebanon, where you were standing on an elevated area, which I'm pretty sure that I visited with you and Hadi recently, within the past year, I should say. And you were looking down on what appeared to be Israeli troops in a valley. They didn't seem to be in any kind of, shall we say, defensive posture. They just seemed to be roaming around the area, doing whatever they pleased, with no fear of resistance at all. Where are these troops currently, to the best of your understanding, in terms of Lebanese territory? What parts of Lebanon do they currently occupy?
That area is called Wadi al-Hujir. We passed through it before with you. It's near that water park, if you remember, that we passed in the middle of the valley. The Israelis had pushed there into the reserve and were just, ruining some of the signs around and pushing some of the trees around and breaking up the road. And then they withdrew from that area. So they're not there. But the areas that they're occupying right now are the frontline villages near the Hula Valley and near the Naqoura area on the coast. Much of the rest of the south they had withdrawn, but they keep on sending messages to the residents of the southern villages that their areas are military zones and they shouldn't come back. But the residents are coming back anyways. So most of the villages, people have went back to them, and they're trying to rebuild and clean up the ruins and find if there's any martyrs under the rubble. That still continues, and on a daily basis, there is funerals in the south in these villages that people go back to. I don't know if the Emperor Trump will give a gift to the new president, Joseph Aoun, and get the Israelis to actually withdraw from the south of areas that they occupied. But if they don't, it will be basically embarrassing for this new president, and Hezbollah will be back in full force. The question is, if we look at the bigger picture for the region, what's going to happen with Yemen, what's going to happen in Syria, what's going to happen with Iran as President Trump comes in. Lebanon becomes a kind of an afterthought once you take a bigger picture look at this region.
So what do you think is likely to happen when this ceasefire expires within days of Donald Trump assuming the throne? And just to remind people, the ceasefire went into effect on November 27th for 60 days. What's your best estimate of what's going to transpire, Laith?
Well, I think they will not withdraw, the Israelis, personally. But I may be wrong. But you look at how emboldened the Zionists are already before Trump comes in. The fact that they continue to genocide in Gaza nonstop, the fact that they continue to ethnically cleanse the south of Syria and expand on a daily basis with no stop. I mean, Trump coming in will probably give them even more leeway to do whatever they want to. And so if I was a Zionist, I would do whatever I want to, because the whole West has capitulated to Zionism, and is, supporting anything that the Zionist colony wants, and will protect it and supply it with money and arms and international protection in the international arena until somebody dares to actually defeat them. Otherwise, this will continue. Why would they back down?
So I've seen reports. Well, first of all, apparently there are people within the Israeli government and/or political heavyweights in Israel who are saying that Israel has to prepare for war with Turkey. I've also seen reports. I don't think there's any objective confirmation of them, but they're certainly interesting, that Iran and Turkey have reached some sort of a deal which authorizes or will enable Iran to continue to supply the Islamic resistance in Lebanon overland through areas of Syria that are currently controlled by Turkey or its proxies. What do you make of all of this? Do you think there is a serious prospect of war between Turkey and Israel? And do you think that there is any credibility to the reports that Turkey has struck this kind of a deal with Iran?
The prospects of a war between Israel and Turkey are similar to the prospects of war between Canada and the US, which is never going to happen. These are all vessels that are working, coordinated with the imperial forces. They may wrangle over the loot, as usually happens, but other than that, it's impossible that they will have a war. And I don't think that Turkey will allow Iran to transfer weapons through Syria to Hezbollah. That's also another imaginary thing. Look, both of these news articles are designed to make it look like there is something honorable in the Erdogan government. They are trying to confuse the reader to continue thinking, oh, well, maybe there is. Maybe, with Assad gone, now the HTS and Wahhabi death squad, suddenly, for the first time ever in half a century, they'll attack Israel. So maybe now Turkey has this, and now it's the strongest Muslim country, and therefore it will take its responsibility. You'll see. You see, they're just trying to confuse you and confuse the audience. The reality is Erdogan is a vassal. Turkey and the Turkish military are captured by the West. There's so many American bases inside Turkey that it's checkmate. There's no way it can move as a Turkish government. And as we see, there's not been one bullet fired on the Israelis inside Syria, let alone in the occupied Golan Heights. No, there will be none of that. And I think Iran should actually take a page from the imperialist, including Turkish actions in the last year, and instead of waiting for the moves of the enemy to actually go ahead and start taking proactive actions. And I would say their best bet is to go into Azerbaijan and support Armenia in their fight against Azerbaijan, but go militarily. Azerbaijan, they can be in 10 hours, they could occupy the whole country, the Iranians, and they should occupy it. Because the Turks, the Americans, the Saudis, the Israelis, they're all occupying out in the open. And Trump is saying he's going to take half of the Western hemisphere the minute he's in power, and nobody can stop him. Well, Iran should act in those ways too. Liberate Azerbaijan from Israeli and American control. Help Armenia shift back to the east instead of being surrounded by Erdogan and Azerbaijan and such. There's other things that Iran can do that can force Turkey into taking more reasonable actions, even when it's still part of the empire.
And since we're on the subject of Iran, there seems to be more intense pressure. There always has been intense pressure on the U.S. government to attack Iran. And now that Trump is coming in, surrounded himself with the most bloodthirsty of neohawks or neocons and Iran haters. There's all the chatter about Iran being on the cusp of a nuclear weapon. They're about to do some kind of a deal with the Russian Federation, which could have a security component to it and enhance Iran's capability to defend itself with the use of Russian technology. What do you anticipate is going to happen in the months ahead once the Trump character assumes the throne in terms of U.S. relations with Iran? And do you think that where we are currently headed is with a U.S. orchestrated attack on the country?
Yeah, I mean, look, I really can't tell because this guy is a wild card. Trump seems to be, all of us were arguing 6 months ago which one is going to be that he's going to attack the axis of resistance, or is it he's going to go to China, or is it to Ukraine? But now we hear he wants to go to Greenland, Canada, and Panama. So it's really weird, So I think the ascendancy of Trump is only increasing the level of instability and unpredictability of the situation. So we'll see. And maybe this is where we should be looking at what Israel is going to do, because maybe it will be taking lead to force Trump, let's say, away from Greenland, Canada, and Panama, back to concentrating on the axis of resistance. We'll see what's the sway of the Zionist. How far is it in the media and in the government that he's going to be forming? But ultimately, the war in Palestine, the war in Gaza, it's forcing the whole region, even with or without American involvement, to deal with it somehow. And as we see, it dragged every country between Turkey all the way to Yemen into this war over the last year and a half. When you mentioned the Israelis threatening Turkey or saying Turkey is a threat, they also last week were threatening Egypt and saying, Egypt is moving military into Sinai. And we saw all these Western media.
Excuse me, is Sinai the Arabic translation for the Sinai?
Exactly.
The
Arabic word for it. Yes, the Sinai. Yes. Right. And so in the Sinai, and we heard, we saw all these Western media and the Israeli media pump up this HTS Egyptian leader that wants to liberate Egypt and is flying the old colonial flag of Egypt, just like the HTS in Syria is flying the colonial flag of Syria. It seems like the Israelis, their thirst and hunger for lands and blood of Arabic people is insatiable. So I don't know what's going to happen.
My own working theory, for what it's worth, is that, and of course I could be completely wrong here, who knows when you're talking about Donald Trump and what's going on in that orange head of his, but that he's focusing on the Western Hemisphere because at a certain level he understands that American power is receding in the Eurasian landmass, and there's going to have to be a retrenchment, not because he believes that's the right thing, but because it's unavoidable just as a practical reality given the rising strength of China and Russia. And so he's he's looking for some way to compensate for the loss of American power and prestige by greatly enhancing its dominance of the Western Hemisphere. That's my best guess as to what's going on here, because I otherwise can't make sense of why all of a sudden Donald Trump has started talking about the annexation of Canada and Greenland, the seizure of the Panama Canal, and the renaming of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. You have any thoughts about that, Laith? Do you think it's at all possible that somewhere up in that head of Donald Trump's, there is a certain element of realism about the shifting distribution of power in the world?
I mean, honestly, I think it's the smartest thing that he ever said. Think about it. I mean, we're in the age of out and out empire and genocides, and there's no more international law. And there's whole theatrics about democracy in Canada or in Greenland or what have you, when in reality they're all vassals. So you might as well just out and out take it into your imperial domain and cut on all the governmental waste with having these puppet regimes that each one has to spend on itself all this money and acts and clothing from 5-star brands and whatever it is. You cut all of that and you give Canada one seat in the Congress. This is all he needs, and it's done. The Imperial Senate. He'll save so much money. And anyways, Canada is totally owned by America. Over the last 20, 30 years, all of the resources of Canada were sold out. Even all the lumber companies and paper companies and everything. There's nothing left in Canada that isn't owned by the United States and or China. And he wants to probably push China out of the oil fields of Canada and other resources that China's starting to develop in Canada. So it is a very smart thing as an emperor to do. Why waste time trying to loot the resources in Africa, for instance, when you can just loot everything in Canada out in the open, and you have this whole territory you can expand the population into. My question is, he also promised he will be expelling 20 million immigrants to Mexico, basically. And he also promised he will be, labeling the drug cartels in Mexico as terrorist organizations, which will give him the authority to use military force inside Mexico. So where are we going with that one? That's actually the tricky one. He will take Canada in a minute. Probably Trudeau is the last prime minister of Canada. He probably resigned because he didn't want to be the one that signs on the dotted line giving Canada away. He's going to let Bolivar be the one that have to do it. But Mexico is not going to be an easy thing for him to capture.
Yeah, now that we live unequivocally in the law of the jungle around the world, that's, I think, the best way to describe the current era. Who knows? Anything's possible, particularly when it comes to the U.S. Empire's exercise of its power. I want to now conclude our discussion, Laith, by focusing upon Palestine. In the last 10 days or so, the Israeli genocidal military has experienced quite significant casualties by the standards, of the Israeli military in northern Gaza, which it was supposed to have cleared, to which it has subjected, the most horrific atrocities, which, it appears to covet as the next sort of point of settlement on Palestinian land. I think 5 soldiers were killed, including officers. Many more were wounded in northern Gaza. I've seen reports that Hamas has been able to recruit unusually large numbers of new fighters, not surprisingly, if that's true, because of the justifiable rage that many young Palestinian men must be feeling at what is being done to their people. How do you assess not just in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, because I know you have reporters on the ground there doing fantastic work in the occupied West Bank. How do you assess the state of the resistance within Palestine itself?
Yeah, I mean, the incident you're talking about in northern Gaza, today there's still 3 of these Israeli soldiers under the rubble, and the Israeli military had to send a huge convoy for lifting the rubble, but also everybody that protects this convoy to try to reach the bodies of their dead. And this shows you that, of course, number one, the Palestinian resistance is still alive and well, even in this area that's totally destroyed and emptied of its civilian population, that the resistance has cameras set up in these locations. We've seen videos before of them, filming the movement of Israeli soldiers and setting traps for them. We are seeing still missiles being fired from Gaza, even from the north of Gaza, from this region, onto the Zionist colonies outside Gaza. So the resistance is still well and alive. And yes, anybody in Gaza that was pacifist before, or didn't support Hamas or Islamic Jihad or anything like that, is now a radical revolutionary for survival purposes. And every Palestinian knows that the Israelis want to kill every Palestinian. There's no and there's only defense against them is to carry arms. So they don't need to pitch people anymore, even about carrying arms. And the pacifist, liberal, PLO, Fatah kind of style of things is stuff of the 20th century, that cannot sell within the Palestinian community. In the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority continues its attacks on the area of Jenin and Tul Karim in collaboration with the occupying forces. They have, detained one of our journalists 2 days ago. He's out today. Abada Tahani, who covers the activities in Jenin. And there's another Palestinian journalist who, right now I'm forgetting his name, but we interviewed on Free Palestine TV in the Jenin area. He's being tortured, according to lawyers, by the Palestinian Authority security forces because of his coverage that is very similar to FPTV's, but is in Arabic. And so the Palestinian Authority right now, it seems like, is trying to sell itself in these moments before Trump comes in to the Israelis as a useful tool that needs to be kept, because the majority of the cabinet of Netanyahu doesn't want the Palestinian Authority anymore, and they want to declare the whole West Bank as part of the Zionist colony, and Trump is expected to approve that. These house slaves are trying to show that there's some use for them still, and kind of begging their masters to keep them.
Mm-hmm. And finally, Laith, how can people support the work of Free Palestine TV, and where can they find the excellent reporting you've been doing on the ground?
Yes, so you can go to our website, freepalestine.video. You can donate. We encourage everybody to subscribe for a monthly donation so we can have a continuous income and budget our work on that. You can follow us on all social media platforms. All the links are there on our website. We're on X, on Rumble, and we're trying to come back to YouTube right now. YouTube shut down our page just a week and a half ago, deleting 7 million hits and almost 1 million views on it. So we're lost all of that viewership and the donation that came with that. Please follow us on the other platforms, and hopefully we'll be back soon on YouTube and we'll announce it to everybody.
Thank you, Laith. And just for the benefit of the Reason to Resist audience, as I mentioned at the outset, I'm in Cuba. I'll be returning to Canada this week and plan to publish a report of an interview with a Cuban gentleman who talked about the current state of the revolution here. And I very much hope, Laith, and plan to visit West Asia again during the winter. And hopefully I'll be able to make it to Lebanon and to join you and Hadi in the south of the country again to survey the devastation and the state of the resistance. So thank you very much for joining me today, Laith, and please do stay safe, and our best wishes to you and your family.
Good to be with you, Dimitri. Bon voyage. See you soon, inshallah.
And this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Trinidad, Cuba on January 13th, 2025.